At this point, you should already be familiar with connectivity options for the WAN. And when I say WAN, I mean multiple geographically separated networks connected together. For such networks, you can't use the Ethernet link and the Ethernet standards. Serial, meaning point-to-point communication, can be used instead. This serial communication link provides a single established WAN communication path from one location through a carrier network to another remote location. So imagine that you need to connect two geographically separated areas. Let's say we have an office in New York and another office in London. If you want a permanent dedicated connection, a point-to-point link should be used. Now you heard me saying a permanent dedicated point-to-point connection. Those types of connections are usually leased from a carrier, so that's why they're sometimes called leased lines. And what does this mean? The carrier dedicates fixed transport capacity, so fixed bandwidth if you want, and facility hardware to the line that the customer is leasing. The bandwidth refers to the rate at which the data is transferred over the communication link. The actual underlying carrier technologies depend on the bandwidth that's available. For example, there's a difference in the bandwidth between the North American T carrier specification and the E carrier specification, as you can see. If you buy a specific dedicated link just for you, what do you think this means in terms of cost? Those point-to-point links are usually more expensive than if you share the service with others. If you have only one link, this is not really a big issue. But if you have many, let's say 100 sites to connect, the cost can become quickly significant, wouldn't you agree? This pricing actually depends on the bandwidth as well as the distance between the two connected points. Okay, but let's not try and be so negative. Of course, there are some benefits that you can actually outweigh this cost issue. Are you curious on what those might be, or have you already guessed? Well, it's the fact that dedicated capacity removes latency or jitter between the endpoints. And where would this be useful? Can you think of any application that has such demands? Voice or video are good examples. They demand constant availability as well as no or very little latency. Okay, let's say you've decided to use a serial connection between two locations. What do you need? Besides the contact of a carrier that will provide you this link, of course. Well, you also need a router that has a serial port, and you need a separate serial port for each leased line. If the underlying network is based on the T carrier or E carrier technologies, each leased line connects to the carrier's network using a CSU/DSU. Why would you need a CSU/DSU? The DSU is to provide a clocking signal to your equipment interface, and the CSU is to terminate the channelized transport media of the carrier. Luckily, with most T1 or E1 interfaces on today's routers, you don't need a special CSU/DSU box, and that's because the interfaces include those CSU/DSU capabilities. So to sum it all up, leased lines provide permanent dedicated capacity and are used for building WANs. They are normally more expensive. The benefit, though, is that they reduce latency and jitter due to the fixed capacity on the link. But this fixed capacity can actually remain unused because of the variability of WAN traffic. Also, let's not forget, each endpoint needs a separate physical interface on the router, which can increase the cost of the equipment.